Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, joined by Bryce Rossler for the second week in a row. Both of us of the SIS Football Research Team. We've got our producer, Justin Stein, with us. Today we're going to talk about the NFC Contenders. But before we do that, we've got to talk about a big move in the AFC. The Dolphins signed former Raiders first-round pick Damon Arnett from the Raiders. How does that impact the Super Bowl picture, Bryce?
I didn't even know that happened, to be honest with you.
That just came off the wire right there. We're breaking news. It won't be new news by the time people listen to this, but I can tell you that will have no impact whatsoever.
Hopefully he gets his head on straight.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be good, all that kind of stuff. But neither of those teams, I think, really impactful. Anyway, we can switch things over to the NFC now because that is what we are here to discuss. You ready to get into it?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Just like we did last week, we're going to start at the top. We're going to talk about the different contenders from the NFC. And as we said at the top of last week's case, and I think is even more so the case in the NFC than the AFC, there's a big difference between being a Super Bowl contender and just a playoff contender. So let's start off at the top with those Super Bowl contenders. Right now, if the season ended today, it would be the Packers in the number 1 seed. Bryce, what is the stat that we should all know about Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay Packers?
Okay, so the NFL is obviously a big 11 personnel league, but if you're not in 11, you're probably in 12. Those are the two big personnel groupings, and then you can run or pass out of those, right?
Most of our listeners are extremely smart and know this already. 11, 1 running back and 1 tight end. 12, 1 running back and 2 tight ends. So that 2-digit number is always the number of running backs and the number of tight ends. So you're either talking about a 3 wide receiver base offense or a 2 tight end base offense. Very few offenses are base 2-man backfield offenses.
Yeah, there are some teams that do it, but mostly teams
at lower levels.
Yeah, most plays for most teams are going to come out of 11 or 12. And with that groundwork laid, I found it interesting that the Packers are the only team to rank in the top 10 in EPA per play for those 4 modes of offense. 11 personnel passing and running and 12 personnel passing and running. They are capable of giving you a lot of different looks. Aaron Rodgers is obviously very good at getting into the looks they need to be in. So we talk a lot about the talent that they have on offense. Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, arguably the best at their positions in the NFL, but structurally they give you a lot of stuff to defend, and you could probably speak to this a little better than I could, but that's tough to game plan for when you can be quote unquote multiple and you have all this personnel at your disposal. They're not a team that people want to play right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think what you're getting into there when you talk about like why it's effective is that at a basic level, if you want to play us in base when we're in 12 personnel, then we feel like we can pass against you. If you want to compensate against that a certain way and try to play nickel, then we're going to run against you out of that, and you're going to get one of our 2 awesome running backs kind of down your throat in that case. And then we've got answers for you also if kind of you're well suited to play that way. So like you say, they can present problems for teams in terms of personnel, whether they prefer to be attacking you one way or another. They can kind of run or pass out of both of those schemes. It makes it very hard to figure out what nickel are you going to put on the field? What sort of linebackers can you play? Because Aaron Rodgers has an answer. I think also part of it with some of like the old dudes that they brought in and some of the people that are familiar to Aaron Rodgers that he's had around, that familiarity I think is really key. There's very little of that in the NFL after 2020 and 2021, where, I became so spoiled by it when I was in New Orleans of the way that Drew Brees and Colston and Lance Moore, these guys were automatically already on the same page before we even started. There's a little bit of that I think can really help you out when you're in these kind of December games when it's a 1-possession game, and familiarity can be the difference some of the time. So I think you're right there. I think the question, and I don't think we'd be like blowing anybody's mind by saying this, is more defensive with them. They're one of the top offenses in the league by total points. They're a middle of the pack defense. I think some people kind of hear complimentary football and they think that's good. They're running the ball and they're controlling the clock and they're making it so that the defense is in good situations to succeed. And, some people think that at a certain point, they could get exposed back there. I think it's going to be a matter of time before we find out. I'm encouraged because I think they have much better coaching going on than they've had in the past couple of years on defense. I think they have a real plan. The question is kind of like if it's going to work in all those times when we've seen it fail these past few years.
Yeah, and I don't think the cupboard is bare for them on defense by any means. I think they've got more talent on defense than they've had in the past in some of those older Aaron Rodgers teams in the McCarthy era. They have arguably the best safety tandem in the NFL, and Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. Jair Alexander is supposed to return to practice soon, so they might get him back
too. Yeah.
In the home stretch, Devondre Campbell has been a really good signing for them. They're not horrible on defense. Certainly not one of the best units in the league, but I wouldn't call them a liability by any means.
Quietly, as always, Kenny Clark's playing awesome. What he's doing up front for them. He's a player that I think gets slept on a lot. That's kind of consistently awesome. Like Prashawn Gary gets a little bit more press, who's played well in his own right. But 25 total points from that nose tackle position is pretty good. Teal, what do we like? What do we not like about the Packers? I guess we mostly both said we like more what's going on offense. We don't love what's going on defense, but we still feel pretty good about it. This is a top tier contender in the NFC, right?
I would say so, especially if they get some guys back and healthy, some key players. I know we talked about Alexander. Bakhtiari is listed as questionable currently, so he might be trending in the right direction. So this is the team that if they get those two guys healthy, they're getting some really big pieces back at a key time. They're already the 1 seed. They're playing really good football. I think if you were to list the top Super Bowl contenders, you'd be remiss to skip the Packers.
At Baltimore this weekend. Interesting matchup for them. We'll slot them in there, and we'll see if these next couple of teams that we talk about will slot in above or below them in our sort of power rankings here. Number 2 seed, if the season ended today with that same 10-3 record, there are 3 teams at the top at 10-3. The second one would be the Tampa Brady Buccaneers. 10-3 in that 2 seed. What is the stat to know, Bryce?
The stat is pretty simple. They rank first in offensive total points per game and second in defensive total points per game.
Is that good?
I think so. I would say they're probably the most complete team in the NFL right now. We could talk a very long time about what there is to like about the Buccaneers. I don't think this is a team with very many weaknesses, if any. If they have one, it's in the secondary. But everything else you can just rave about. Obviously, Tom Brady is somehow still playing excellent football at his age. They've got probably the best skill position core in the NFL right now. The offensive line is great. Nobody wants to run the ball on them. Their backers are fast and aggressive. This is another team that is definitely going to make a deep run. I probably like them more than the Packers just because of how complete they are. I don't see a whole lot of flaws with this team. I don't know how you feel about them, though.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot to like. I don't disagree with that. Brady's second in total points so far. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of good stuff going on. Are there things that you don't like about this team, or you're just across the board all about them?
Like I mentioned, if there's one weakness you can point out, it's in the secondary. I think the corner position is probably their weakest position group.
How does it add up that a team that plays to basically convince you not to run on them, right? Vita Vea is in there and just mashes people and nobody can run on them. And that's kind of how they go against you. They take away that, they make you one-dimensional, all that. Is that weird in the modern NFL that it's a team with a questionable secondary or questionable corners compared to the other positions on their roster would want to force you to pass all the time? Like, how does that square with what we know about passes being more efficient than runs and things of that nature?
I don't even know if it's necessarily a philosophical thing for them. It's not even necessarily that I think it's a glaring weakness for them as much as it is Like if I had to call something out that I didn't like about the Bucs, it would be that I just think their secondary is good, not great. They're solid. It's nitpicking, but if you're gonna force me to pick something, that would be what I'd isolate.
We don't spend a lot of time talking about special teams. They are one of 3 teams in the NFL, along with the Titans and the vaunted Jets, that average 0 special teams total points per game. So maybe that's something that'll come bite them. But like you say, it's kind of hard to find the areas where they have like those real weaknesses on their team. I wonder philosophically how to square that one point. Obviously, it didn't hurt them last year. And maybe that is the key, just making teams one-dimensional in that sense. They're definitely looking primed for a run. I'm with you. I think they are a little bit of a stronger team overall than the Packers. Very interesting to see who gets that one bye, because it's going to be so impactful in the NFC.
Especially as it relates to the Packers, the difference between potentially playing an NFC championship game in Green Bay in January versus playing it in Tampa is huge.
A couple guys to shout on Tampa as well. Their offensive line is good. Tristan Wirfs is leading the NFL in total points among offensive tackles, ahead of the likes of Andrew Whitworth, Rashawn Slater, and Orlando Brown, who always seem to find their way to the tops of this list. He's been outstanding. Brian Jensen second, behind Corey Linsley at center. So props to those guys who I think really get it done on the offensive line. We already talked about Vita Vea on the defensive side for them. All right, let's go to the number 3 team, that third team that has that 10-3 record, the Arizona Cardinals. They have the Rams to contend with in their division, which makes them a little bit different than all of the other division leaders here. We'll talk about the Rams in a couple minutes. Bryce, what is the stat to know about the Arizona Cardinals?
So the stat to know for them is that they currently rank 5th in the NFL in EPA per play right now. But there's a bit of a caveat because Kyler Murray has missed some games. And when he has been on the field, their average EPA per play nearly doubles. They would rank 1st in the NFL ahead of the Bucs. So they're arguably the most dangerous offense in the league right now. That's probably not a surprise considering they've got Kyler Murray and they've got DeAndre Hopkins and they've added some complementary pieces around them. The Rams game was a bit of a bummer for them. They kind of got exposed on the interior by Aaron Donald, and to a lesser extent on the outside, but the Rams tend to do that to people.
Individually, he was just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's hard to knock him too much for that. I would say that's something that I don't really like about them is the offensive line. They're not terrible, but I think the strength of their offense comes on the arm of Kyler Murray, the legs of Kyler Murray, and the receiving talent. I don't necessarily know if that's the best recipe for a Super Bowl run. I would definitely put them behind the Packers and the Buccaneers if we're talking about tiering the contenders. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think for the beginning of the season, they looked really strong, and it's easy to have like recency bias just having seen them kind of go through the rough patch in the season with Kyler injured and then the game that we saw the other night. That said, they've been really awesome, and especially if Kyler's at full strength and the team is at full strength, which they've been far from, they're really special. The defense has been the top defense in the league, and it's hard to find anything to question on there. There's still a little bit of like, pinch me, am I dreaming? Like, is this going to work as we keep going through things? But I really think, as you mentioned, the offensive line, ranked 22nd so far this year, rushing, not a very highly ranked team is what, everybody wants to, hooray, James Conner, all that kind of stuff. But really, we know how this team is built. If Kyler can hum like Kyler, and man, he's the type of player you never want to play against, right? You combine a great defense with a player like that, because no matter what you game plan against him, he's got an answer, and it's this quickness that's just, can be impossible to account for. Not his greatest game, but I remember one throw sprinting, like literally sprinting, running faster than I could run at any point in my life if I was trying my hardest in a 40-yard dash, and made a dime throw 30 yards downfield while about to be out of bounds. Or I thought he was already out of bounds before he even started to throw. So, I mean, it's that sort of physical ability that's impossible to account for. That's the thing to like about them. The thing to not like is he's a little guy and they've got questionable offensive line. And to the extent that they can't spread people out and get the ball out of his hands quickly, eventually he probably does end up getting hit. And again, then, what does that look like? Is it more time missed? So I think they have a lot of upside. All this is to say, I think they have a lot of upside, but I am with you at the end of the day where they're a half notch behind the Super Bowl champs and, the team with the best quarterback that I've ever seen, who are two separate teams, by the way.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm completely discounting the Cardinals, right? Like they're going to be a tough out for
But
anybody.
they're a Super Bowl contender. Yeah, they're a Super Bowl contender.
They're a contender. It's just I have a tough time putting them on the same footing with the Packers and the Buccaneers because of all the things we've talked about.
I mentioned before, Brady is second in total points if you in accumulation basis. Kyler Murray is second on a rate basis. Both of them trail only Justin Herbert, who people are coming back around on again.
Funny how that works.
Moving forward from the Cardinals, let's go to the 4th seed, the other division leader, who I think are in a better spot to be in than the Cardinals are because they don't have to deal with the Rams, the Dallas Cowboys. And I know exactly what I like and I don't like about this team because it hasn't changed since before the season started. Bryce, start us off and let us know what the stat to know about this team is.
Okay, so the stat to know is that Micah Parsons and Randy Gregory ranked first and second in passing total points saved per pass rush. They're 1 and 2.
It's pretty crazy. We knew Micah Parsons was a good pass rusher. And I think part of the question in the sort of the evaluation process with him, like why wasn't this guy rated even more highly than, a 6-7 final grade, which is like a first round grade really. But, he was drafted where number 11, something like that. He wasn't the first defensive player off the board even. And it seems like he should have been in retrospect, although Patrick Surtain and J.C. Horn, when he was healthy, was also very good. A lot of really good players at the top of the draft this year, honestly, besides the quarterbacks who have not looked as good as a lot of the other top position player talents. I think what was hard is this guy a linebacker? If he's a linebacker, then you're kind of going to want to rush him all the time, and that's really not the most valuable trait for linebackers to have, right? You want linebackers that can do more in coverage, ideally. And he's been okay in coverage. He can obviously run out there. He doesn't really know what he's doing quite yet in all the time, but it's much easier to say, go get the quarterback. And what they're doing with him, both as a down rusher and then also as a kind of off-ball blitzer, picking and choosing the matchups that he gets, he's been awesome. I don't think he's Chase Young. I don't think he's that sort of Myles Garrett type talent at the end of the day, even though a lot of people, get on the rookie of the year hype train and want to talk like that. But he's been really, really good.
I'm interested to see how their defensive game plan sort of crystallizes now that DeMarcus Lawrence is back in the fold too. I mean, I know he's been back for a couple games, but I'm interested to see how that affects Parsons' usage as we enter the home stretch.
Yeah.
Because DeMarcus Lawrence, I mean, he's been really solid for them the past couple years. I know he had that big year in 2017 or whatever, and his sack numbers haven't been as good since then, but he's been 15% plus pressure rate guy for the past 4 years. Getting him back is big.
Yeah, I think that the Cowboys probably their best alignment and the best alignment that we saw them deploy this past week was probably with those two guys on the edge, Gregory and Lawrence, and with 3 down and Micah Parsons rushing from who knows where in that kind of a amoeba-ish front that he was hanging out in. That's a real tough thing to go against there.
Yeah, I think the key for them is going to be, can they get teams into favorable distances on third down? This is not a particularly strong run defense. They rank towards the bottom of the league in total points in that regard. But like you said, if they can get people to third down on defense, the crazy stuff that you can do with those 3 pass rushers is going to give people a lot of problems.
Yeah, definitely a team that you probably want to run at and try to really pound that way rather than getting to a match where they can get all these pass rushers out on you, because that is a tough thing to consider. I'll tell you what I like and I don't like about the Cowboys. What I like is their roster. I still think their offense is outstanding. Their offensive line is outstanding, especially with Tyron Smith back in there. Zach Martin is playing out of his mind as usual. I think it's a really good debate for who the best guard in the NFL is right now. Total points would tell you that it is Zach Martin, but I do think that it's a close call.
The other one being Quentin Nelson. I'm assuming you have in mind. Yeah.
For me, yeah. So I think they're scary when both of those receivers are healthy, when both of their pass rushers are healthy, with Parsons and Diggs playing the way that they've played so far this year. I think those guys are probably they're peaking. I don't think what Parsons and Diggs have been to this point this year is a sustainable level of production for them going forward. But I still think that they're both very good players. So this is a team that I think is a real Super Bowl contender, just like the rest of these teams that we've talked about. They're really not going to have to contend with anybody nipping at their heels in the division. That said, they're also likely not going to be given the luxury of a bye. So what I don't like comes back to their head coach, and their head coach who's been forced to adopt a lot of things in order to get into the position that he's been in. You've seen him by the books been more sort of analytically inclined from a fourth down decision-making standpoint and things like that. But I still worry about that guy in charge at the end of the day. It feels like a disadvantage to me compared to when they're going against the Bruce Arians or even a LaFleur, definitely a McVay. So I worry about that. And I worry about the ability to have it all come together there. But man, they've got all the players. They really do.
Somebody we haven't even mentioned yet is Dak Prescott. I don't know how you feel about Dak, but I think I would put him top 5 in the NFL.
I think most people don't actually have him in the top 10, and I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Top 5 is pushing it. Top 5 gets hard when you talk about the guys at the top there. But what was I watching? I was watching Thursday Night Football on the Scouts feed, and they reeled off their top 10 lists, and Stafford and Dak were both, I think, on the outside looking in, and that one surprised me. Now, it gets hard. It gets hard real quick to stack the good quarterbacks up there. But he's a win-with quarterback. He's the definition of a win-with quarterback. You don't win games. You don't win many games because of Dak. He's not the reason why you win consistently.
Oh, I disagree.
Oh, you think he's a win because
I think he's a win because of guy. Yeah.
I can't go that far. I think he plays with the benefit of a really good offensive line, great weapons that they've had in Dallas since the beginning of time. That offense, I think, is really well built, and he fits into it. I don't see him as a Mahomes. I
don't think he's Mahomes, but that doesn't mean he's not a win because of guy.
I think that you can win games because of him from time to time. He'll do his thing, which is what a win-with quarterback does. But win-with is you win with a Super Bowl with this guy, not you win a Super Bowl because of this guy. I don't think you win Super Bowls because of Dak Prescott. So that's kind of my definitional thing there. But now,
so what is the constraining trait or traits that you think limit him from being a win because of guy?
I don't think he's somebody that kind of changes the competitive balance of a football game by his presence. I think that he's somebody who is a top 10 NFL quarterback and is a leader and is a big part of the reason why you win games. And I don't want to sound critical of him. This is a little bit more of a semantic thing. But to me, if you go into a game with a Patrick Mahomes, with an Aaron Rodgers, for the next few years with a Justin Herbert, I think we can put him into that category. The other team, while they're planning throughout the week, they have to find ways to mask the fact that your quarterback is better than theirs. And I just don't see that in Prescott. I don't think he's limited athletically, but I don't think he's got an arm like those guys do. I don't think he's in a dirty pocket, the quality of decision maker that those guys are, right? Sub out Patrick Mahomes for Dak Prescott in the Super Bowl last year. You can say this with almost any quarterback, but if you put Dak Prescott in there, I don't think the Chiefs score 9 points.
I think you're underselling Prescott. I think his pre-snap process is really good. I think he's accurate. I think you can trust him to make the right decisions, get you in the right calls. He definitely doesn't have a Mahomes arm, but not many players, if anybody, do.
Yeah. You're making me feel like this is almost like a political conversation, right? I may think I'm left of center, but then if I talk to somebody who's more left than me, then all of a sudden I'm arguing the right points. You could sub in left or right there. I'm not actually getting political, but like I feel like you're outflanking me. I'm saying like I think he's underrated, and I think you're saying I'm underrating the amount that he's underrated.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm right and you're wrong.
Well, that's definitely for sure. No, he's a really good player. I'm not going to give him the win because of he's a classic win with guy, and I mean that in the best possible way. I would pay him all the money in the world to be my quarterback. But like, to me, he's been in a system that has been very conducive to success, and he's done a good job in that system. I see him as somebody who maxes out kind of like the potential levels that you could have, not somebody who goes like above that changes what the maximum can be for you. And I could be wrong on that front. The thing that I'll say to your point is if he could do it with Jason Garrett, I mean, what can this guy not do? Those are the division leaders. One more team that I think we think of in the actual Super Bowl contender category in the NFC, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would put the Rams into that category as well. They're 9-4 right now. They're the 5 seed. They're a game behind the Cardinals in the NFC West. What's the stat to know about the Los Angeles Rams?
You and I talk about boom and bust rate a lot in terms of big swings in EPA on a play, either positively or negatively. Right now, Stafford has the highest boom rate in the NFL and the lowest bust rate.
That sounds like a good combination.
I think he's, as you know, I'm a Lions fan, unfortunately. I think that this is the best ball Stafford has played in his career. Obviously, it helps that his situation improved drastically this past offseason, going from the Lions to the Rams. I know he slumped a little bit.
Offensive line in total points really helps.
Yeah, he slumped a little bit for like a 3-game stretch there. He looked really good against the Cardinals the other night. I think it was completely ridiculous that people thought that he wasn't an upgrade over Goff. I think he's unlocked an awful lot of stuff for their offense. They can definitely score points in bunches. On the defensive side of the ball,
he can make Odell get touchdowns.
Well, he's no Baker Mayfield. But on the defensive side of the ball, I think the big thing is they have the best cornerback in the NFL in Jalen Ramsey. And
the best player in the NFL.
The best player in the NFL in Aaron Donald.
This guy's so unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he absolutely destroyed that game. Like you could count the points that he was creating right there on your hand, and it shows up on the total points rankings. He's up at 41 total points, leading defensive tackles. Next closest person to him has 27. Javon Hargrave and Christian Wilkins are tied with Chris Jones also at 27 total points. He's got more than 50% more than them. That's the sort of impact that he has on a football game. The guy's just absolutely a game wrecker. And then Jalen Ramsey also leading the NFL in total points. So total points not necessarily telling us something that we didn't already know about those two guys, but certainly confirming the eye test on that front.
And I'll add that Leonard Floyd is in the top 10 in total points among pass rushers as well.
I was thinking a little bit about Floyd, just watching them play, and how his speed and his ability off the edge really creates wider lanes, really forces the offensive line to widen, which plays into Aaron Donald, just ragdolling people on the inside. I think those guards that were just getting abused, part of what was going on there was they were on an island against, they might as well have been tackles trying to guard Aaron Donald with the amount of space that they had to play in. And that's that much harder with Aaron Donald sort of get off, trying to find a way to counteract that. And then he beats you with the hand move or complementary rush move.
Yeah, and I would say that goes both ways though, right? Like when you have an Aaron Donald, that's going to fundamentally affect how you can pass protect. Like you might not be able to chip an edge rusher
right
with a running back because you have to release him through the B gap so you can get a chip on Aaron Donald at the 3-tech.
Nothing seems to work.
Yeah, Aaron Donald is like if you look at the whatever you want to look at, pressure rate, total points over the past couple years for people who have played with Aaron Donald, a lot of guys that you wouldn't think of as household names show up pretty high on some of these leaderboards. And that's not a coincidence.
Right. The amount of attention that those people are getting. I think when you look at the Rams and you take a more of a wider view, like you mentioned, they're a really balanced team. I think that's part of what you got to like about them as a contender. We're both big buyers of Stafford, and we'll continue to buy more Stafford stock as people, for some reason, were letting go of it over the last month or so. They're a top team in total points on offense, blocking, and then on defense in both run defense and pass rush. And I love that combination. When you have a team that's beating people up, we talked about Aaron Donald ad nauseum. Andrew Whitworth, everybody wants to, oh, wow, he's 40. It's unbelievable. What's unbelievable to me is how well he consistently ranks in all of our metrics. He's been one of the best tackles in football for each of the last few years, which is much more impressive to me than his age. This is a really, really good team up front. It's a really well-coached team. They've got a really good quarterback. Where does Stafford behind Dak for you?
Yeah, he's somewhere shortly behind Dak. I'd definitely put him top 10. I wouldn't put him top 5.
Yeah.
So he's somewhere in that 6 to 10 range for me.
To me, they're both win with, but Stafford is closer to sniffing that win because of than Dak is for me. Although at this stage in his career, that's probably becoming less true than it once was, or he probably was a win because of guy before, and we could just never see it because of the Lions. But I think that this becomes a really interesting team. They're balanced offense, defense, special teams are all good. Like I said, up front and on defense and on offense, they're good. They've been a crappy rushing team all year. They haven't been able to figure that out. They average negative rushing total points per game. Is that something that is going to end up being what does them in? Or do we have reason to think that that's not as much of a concern?
I'm going to cop out and say that it depends. A lot of it is on matchup. But I'd also point out that some of these other teams that are going to be in the playoffs in the NFC aren't necessarily the stoutest run defenses. We talked about the Cowboys. The Packers' run defenses, not great. If they go up against the Bucs and they just get completely shut down in that phase of the game, they're forced into these passing downs, it'll be a little tough. But at the same time, they actually have a quarterback this year that can dig them out of some of those holes. In the past, these Jared Goff teams, you got to 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, whatever it may be, and you're feeling a punt coming on. So it might be a little tough depending on the matchup they get, but I also don't think that they can't dig their way out of it if they need to.
I have a really hard time separating any of these 5 teams that we've talked about in terms of their tiers. I almost feel like they're all right there in that same tier. We could divide them out by records. Like obviously the 10-3 teams have a little bit of a better chance at getting the bye, which I think ultimately will dictate which of these 5 teams has the best chance to move forward. But when you ask me, even we said the Buccaneers, if you want to throw them ahead of the Packers there, sure. But I don't know who if you consider the Cowboys, the Rams, the 5th place team, they're not super different level to me than the Bucs Packers tier. Maybe there's a half tier down from the Bucs and Packers to the other 3 teams, but I think all of these teams are legitimate. They could all win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. For those that listened to us last week, we did not feel that way about the AFC at all. You can only see realistically a couple teams making it out of the AFC. These 5 teams here, I could easily see any of them make it to the Super Bowl.
When we recorded last week, it was Thursday. Today we're recording on Wednesday. When we finished recording, Justin went to edit and post the podcast. And by the time posted the Thursday night football game, the Steelers were already getting smoked and just looking like a joke. And I was thinking, okay, that's good. Well, when this gets posted, when Justin finishes, at least we won't have just crushed the Steelers and say they're not a real contender. We don't need to talk about them. And then they went on to play on TV that night and prove us wrong. So it was good that one went the way that we expected it to.
Yeah, just bet against Big Ben. Fade Big Ben, and you'll be all right.
All right, we think those are the real contenders. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back with the pretenders. As we reach the midpoint of December, the football calendar is turning for a lot of us that work on the inside, be it with a college football team where we're starting over and getting ready for next year alongside bowl preparation, or pro teams. As we reach the end of the season, some teams are preparing for a playoff run. Other teams are starting to look ahead towards next year. So I want to highlight a couple of college football products that we have available here at Sports Info Solution. Whether you're a college team looking to get an advantage on your opponents, a pro team looking for the best information on draft prospects, or somebody else who might be interested in all that sort of information, we've got a couple of really interesting things that we've rolled out over the last few months at Sports Info Solutions. One of those, the Data Hub Pro. If you didn't know, the Data Hub Pro exists just like it does for the NFL across all categories for college football. We had a huge upgrade over the offseason, and you can see the Data Hub, so all the ability to filter based on all the Sports Info Solutions data points and see whatever stats that you would want to see, almost anything that you could possibly imagine in whatever situation you could possibly imagine for all 130 teams in the Football Bowl subdivision. So that's the entire Power 5 and the Group of 5. With that, you can also check out the On-Off Report. This is something that we reserve exclusively for our college football and NFL team clients, the ability to see team performance metrics with and without players on and off the field. For example, you can see that in 2021, Oregon's Kayvon Thibodeau has completely changed the way that they perform on defense, specifically against the pass. They've been about 6 points per game better on a rate basis if you extend it out with him on the field compared to off the field in terms of just their pass defense alone. So it's not just the individual stats where you see a player like Thibodeau making a difference, but you can also see it in how the team performs with and without him on the field. And finally, we have our tendency reports. If you're trying to prepare for your next opponent in college football, you'll want to have the most intricate tendency reports available to you, automated, there for you every week so you can see how you stack up in terms of all sorts of different metrics that coaches care about. How are you performing between the 20s? How are you performing in the red zone? Divided out by down and distance, whether you're looking for personnel groups, tendencies from no huddle to shotgun, motion, play action. Are they running zone? Are they running gap? Is it going to be a short drop or a deep drop? All of this information is there for you, tailored in this report by Sports Info Solutions. So those are just a few of what we have to offer on the college football side, in addition, of course, to all of our deep data and analytics. If you're interested in any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to sales@sportsinfosolutions.com, and we'd be happy to help you out to get you the best information available to help teams win. All right, coming back in, we mentioned before that the top 5 teams are the best Super Bowl contenders in the NFC. There are other playoff contenders, and we want to give them a little bit of a shout out as well. One team of those stands out above the others. It is the team in the 6th seed right now, the 7-6 San Francisco 49ers. Bryce, what's the stat to know about Kyle Shanahan's 49ers?
So this is not the Kyle Shanahan offense of yesteryear. You know, we think about Kyle Shanahan offenses, we think about really strong running game, we think about explosive play action passing. That's not really the case this year. They're on the bottom 10 in rushing EPA. Jimmy Garoppolo is in the middle of the pack in terms of EPA per pass off of play action. Things are just not as easy for the 49ers as they've been in the past. I would firmly put them below these other teams we've talked about. The thing that I do like about the 49ers is that they have some star power at some pretty important positions. Trent Williams was a huge signing for them. He's playing great football. Fred Warner, I know a lot of people like to say linebackers don't matter, but I would say that he's the best linebacker in the league, and I think he does a lot of important things for them in coverage. Nick Bosa is really good coming off the edge. Deebo Samuel is kind of a weird player, but he's having a really good year.
Deebo's leading wide receivers in total points, and Kittle is leading tight ends in total points.
Yeah, Kittle was going to be the next one that I mentioned. So they have, like I said, they're not one of the top contenders. You can't, it's really hard to put them up there with the other teams that we've talked about, especially considering the difference in quarterback talent. I would say that Jimmy G is a win in spite of guy. I don't know how you feel about him, but I mean, at the end of the day, like, football is about players, more or less. And having star power at some really important positions makes them dangerous. I wouldn't again, it's hard for me to pick them outright against these other teams, but for that reason, it's hard for me to just completely rule out them making a bit of noise. Now, does that mean that I trust them to run the gauntlet and get to the Super Bowl? No, but they can definitely play spoiler for some teams. I wouldn't consider them a contender, but they can definitely crash somebody's party.
Yeah, I think you said it right. It's hard to put them on the same level as any of those teams because they're a win in spite of type of quarterback. That's why they drafted the replacement quarterback. You can make the argument. I think that Garoppolo's played a bit better of late. He's made some really good throws. So I'll give credit where credit's due. But that's not, we never said that he can't play at all. We said that if you need to surround him with, a really outstanding roster in order to make it the sort of thing where he can succeed. And you got to marry it with the scheme, which I think he's in a good situation to do that with, considering that Shanahan's offense is really well suited for the things that he can do, that most quarterbacks can do, to be fair. So yeah, they're behind all those other teams. I think I agree with that. And I also don't think that, I think that they have players. I don't know that they're very scary in terms of their offensive line unit or defensive line unit. I think that they're good. Debo's been awesome, like we talked about. Kittle's awesome. And those guys are scary to defend. But at the end of the day with this team, I think, like you mentioned, they have enough where you don't want to play them in the playoffs. They're going to be, compared to whoever the 7 seed is in a matchup, assuming they go on to keep the 6 seed, right? If you are the 3 seed playing the 6 seed, that is a much crappier game to be in than the 2 seed facing the 7 seed. When you compare this team to Washington, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, Minnesota, who are we talking about? Like, I think Carolina snuck in there, even though they shouldn't have on my list. That's a really big difference because they're a team that knows how to run the ball, that Garoppolo is competent enough that he can complete a couple of passes. The weapons can scare you. If Kittle starts going off, then it's a problem for you. And people like Bosa defensively, like Fred Warner, they got some dudes. So good playoff contender, probably not a real Super Bowl contender. We'll see if they can prove us wrong. One surprise name on the total points rank that I wanted to shout out, Azeez Al-Shaair, 43 total points for the Niners. Not bad. One of their less heralded defenders.
Yeah, and their safeties, Tart and Ward, are not too shabby either.
Ward's still doing it back there, huh? He had a kind of rough entry into the league, but then he became, I think, what we hoped he would become from a scouting perspective, being kind of that guy that can cover people individually and then also cover a deep zone really competently back there, kind of fly around and be a bit of a jack of all trades. He might have been like a little bit before his time or something because it took a while for him to really settle into a role, like you're saying, where he stands out. All right, let's talk about those 6 and 7 teams. In a normal year, I mean, what can we say? The 17 playoff structure is giving us the beauty of one of these teams making the playoffs. Are any of these 6 and 7 teams Super Bowl contenders? Any of them bother you more than any of the other teams if you had to play them?
The Eagles might be a little annoying just because they've really started to run the ball well. And anytime you play an offense where the quarterback is a legitimate run threat and they've got offensive design around that ability in terms of quarterback run game, whether it be read option or design quarterback run, that's tough to play. Now, I don't have much confidence in Hurts in the passing game, but I think it would be a little annoying to prepare for the style of football that they play just because it's anti-meta in the sense that not a lot of teams are doing this. I think about the NFL as like a meta game. What are teams doing offensively? What body types are popular? What are the valuable positions?
If you're doing something a little bit different, there's an inherent advantage.
Yeah, and I think that makes them a little more annoying. I don't think that they're a Super Bowl contender by any stretch of the imagination, but if I had to pick one out of those 4 teams, Washington, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Atlanta, it would be the Eagles.
Well, congratulations, because Total Points agrees with you. The Eagles are the only of those teams that aren't in the bottom dozen of the league, or maybe even worse than that, like the bottom 8 of the league. No, the bottom dozen. The Vikings are 21st, right, as we speak right now. So, yeah, that said, they're super mediocre. Would you rather play Hurts or Minshew? I think I'd be more nervous about playing Minshew if I had a one playoff game against them.
Wait, are you asking me who I would rather face as the opposing quarterback, or who I would rather start
Who would you rather
if I'm the
face?
Eagle? Oh, I would rather face Minshew.
Okay. I
Minshew is aggressively mediocre.
He is.
Aggressively mediocre. And
Hurts is a really good fantasy quarterback.
I don't care about that.
But then what's he good at?
Running the football.
All right.
What do you mean? What's he good? Like if you're telling me that you want to have to game plan for,
I get what you're saying.
Jalen Hurts running
it's a different game
quarterback power and quarterback sweep and all this weird stuff.
No, what you're saying, like, if you're the Cardinals and the playoffs ended today and you ended up having to play against that team, that would suck, right? Like, it would suck to be the Cardinals and to have to play against a team that could run the ball on you, kind of neutralize all the strengths that you have on defense, keep the ball out of your offense's hands. That would suck. And that's what you're talking about with meta, and there's kind of an uncertainty that would come along with that. Your advantages are sort of diminished there. They can shorten the game and make it more random, which is exactly what you don't want if you feel like you're a much better team than they are. So I get what you're saying as far as that goes. I'm not super bullish on the ability to throw the football. All right, so no need to go too deep on any of those teams. The stat to know on the Eagles, for what it's worth, they have 8 games this year. They ranked either in the top quartile or bottom quartile of single game offensive EPA. So more of that, you don't want to face them with that uncertainty going on there. To finish out, because we don't think any of those are actually real contenders there, thank you for listening to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. For more from SIS, you can check out our website, sportsinfosolutions.com. You can find us on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS, LinkedIn, or really anywhere else on the internet where you type in Sports Info Solutions and hit the search. We've got different consumer-facing products, team-facing products. So if you're interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can always reach us at the show at offthecharts@sportsinfosolutions.com. For Bryce Rossler, Justin Stein, Mark Steinman, and I'm Matt Manocherian, thank you for listening to the Off the Charts Football Podcast.